Have you ever wondered what truly separates wisdom from foolishness? It's not about intelligence, degrees, or how many books you've read. True wisdom is about how you live, how you think, and how you treat others. And according to the ancient Stoics, foolishness isn't just a lack of intelligence. It's a failure to live in alignment with reason and virtue. Today, we're diving into a topic that might make you stop and reflect. 6 signs of a stupid woman, according to Stoic wisdom. Now, before you get the wrong idea, let's be clear. This isn't about judgment or labels. Stoicism isn't about pointing fingers. It's about self-awareness, growth, and personal responsibility. As we explore these 6 signs, I want to challenge you to look inward, not outward. This isn't about them, it's about us. Why Stoicism? Because it's one of the most practical, timeless philosophies for mastering your mindset and living with clarity, strength, and purpose. Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus taught us how to navigate life's chaos with wisdom, and their lessons are just as relevant today as they were thousands of years ago. So, are you wise or foolish? Let's find out together. Sign 1. Prioritizing appearance over character. Imagine this. An elegant woman in her 60s walks into the room. Her dress is impeccable, her hair flawless. Even her posture exudes poise. Everyone turns to look. She radiates confidence. But as the evening unfolds, it becomes clear that while her appearance sparkles, her words are hollow. She interrupts, dismisses, and steers every conversation back to herself. She's polished, but not present. Charming, yet curiously disconnected. And beneath that curated image is someone deeply unsure of who she truly is. I remember someone like this from my own life. Let's call her Margaret. She was in my book club, always perfectly styled, the latest bag on her arm, and a Facebook feed that looked like a lifestyle magazine. But when my mother passed away and I shared my grief with the group, she brushed past it, shifting the conversation back to her skincare routine. That moment stayed with me. I realized then, beauty can attract, but only character can connect. And that's where the Stoics come in with a hard but honest truth. Prioritizing appearance over inner growth is not just unwise. It's a recipe for emotional emptiness. The Stoics, particularly Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius, were clear on this. What you wear, how you look, or even what people say about you, none of it holds lasting value. What matters is your soul, your choices, your discipline, your kindness. The strength of your character is what echoes after you've left the room. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. That means if your thoughts are centered only on looking the part, not living with virtue, your soul begins to fade into a shadow of who you could have become. There's a psychological trap here, especially for women. Society whispers that to stay visible, you must stay young, stay thin, stay pretty. So we spend fortunes chasing it, creams, injections, clothing that promises we'll glow again. But that glow, it fades. And no one tells you what to do when it does. This is why Stoicism offers such a radical, freeing alternative. Instead of chasing mirrors, it invites us to build inner resilience, to cultivate wisdom and compassion, to laugh not just to charm, but because we understand how brief and bizarre this life really is. You don't need to fight time, you need to learn to walk beside it with grace. Margaret eventually left the group, and while she had all the outward markers of success, I always sensed she was alone in her mirror-perfect world. But there was another woman in that room, Joyce, in her late 70s. No makeup, soft cardigan, hands marked by years of living. She listened with her whole face. She remembered your dog's name, And when she spoke, the room leaned in. Joyce had no Instagram-worthy looks, but she had depth. And that depth made you feel seen. So here's the question the Stoics would have you ask. Are you becoming someone others remember for how you looked, or how you made them feel? Because one of those lasts. If you've been caught in the exhausting loop of needing to be put together just to feel worthy, let me say this plainly. You are already enough. But your worth won't grow through another outfit. It will grow through clarity, courage, and kindness. Through building a mind that doesn't bend under pressure. A spirit that speaks quietly but powerfully. That's the kind of beauty that doesn't fade. In the end, true beauty, Stoic beauty, is invisible. It's the calm in your voice when others panic. It's the grace with which you age. It's the wisdom you pass down to those who will never see your photos, but will always carry your words. That's what the Stoics would want you to remember. And maybe next time you stand in front of a mirror, you'll ask not, how do I look today, but who am I becoming? That's a question that will never go out of style. Sign 2. Ignoring self-responsibility. There's a quiet kind of suffering that comes from never owning your part in life's hardships. And if we're honest with ourselves, many of us have been there, especially in moments when it's easier to point outward than inward. For women who've carried the weight of families, careers, and expectations for decades, it's natural to feel that much of life has been shaped by others, by circumstance, by partners, by children, by the changing world around them. But the Stoics remind us of a truth that may feel uncomfortable at first, yet liberating in the long run. When we ignore self-responsibility, we surrender the very power we need to heal, grow, and live with peace. I once knew a woman, recently retired, who spent much of her time lamenting the things she didn't do. Dreams deferred, opportunities missed. When asked why she never pursued those passions, her explanations were always external. Her husband didn't support her ideas. The timing was never right. Her children needed her full attention. And while each of those reasons held some truth, they had also become a convenient shelter, protecting her from facing the reality that she had never truly claimed responsibility for her own choices. This mindset, though common, is dangerous. It gives our agency away piece by piece. Stoicism teaches that while we can't control the winds of fate, we can control how we set our sails. Epictetus wrote, "We cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond to them." That wisdom isn't just philosophy, it's psychological truth. Blaming others creates a feedback loop of helplessness. It relieves us of guilt in the short term, but fosters bitterness, regret, and passivity over time. Responsibility, by contrast, is not about self-blame. It's about self-empowerment. When you say, "This is my life and I have a say in how I live it," you shift from being a passenger to becoming the pilot. Let's say you feel emotionally distant from an old friend. Instead of waiting for her to call, what if you picked up the phone first? What if, instead of mourning the years that passed, you made this one count? That simple act of choosing to act rather than to blame plants a seed for change. Seneca once said, "It is not because things are difficult that we do not dare. It is because we do not dare that they are difficult." This is about courage. Courage to look inward. Courage to accept your part in what your life has become. But also, courage to know that if you had a hand in building the life you have, then you also hold the power to rebuild, reshape, and reimagine what comes next. Taking responsibility is the first step, not toward guilt, but toward freedom. Sign 3. Overvaluing others' opinions. Let's move on to the third sign of foolishness according to Stoic wisdom: overvaluing others' opinions. There's a quiet kind of exhaustion that comes from living under the weight of other people's opinions. For many women, especially those in their later years who have spent a lifetime meeting expectations as mothers, wives, professionals, or caregivers, this pressure becomes second nature. It starts small, a friend's raised eyebrow when you say no to a holiday plan, a relative's comment about what you wore to church, or the silence that follows when you speak up in a group. And just like that, you begin to second-guess yourself. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because someone might not approve. This habit of overvaluing the opinions of others is one of the most self-erasing tendencies a person can develop, and the Stoics knew it well. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor who governed an empire and yet struggled like the rest of us with human frailty, observed, "We love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own." It's a painful truth. We spend decades building lives that reflect our values, only to start handing over our self-worth to people who often don't even understand us fully. And in today's world, where visibility is constant, social media, group chats, community gossip, the pressure to be acceptable can feel unrelenting, even for women who never asked for that stage. I knew a woman once who spent months debating whether to take a painting class. She had always loved art, had put it off for decades while raising children and supporting her husband's career. But now, in retirement, she finally had time. Still, she hesitated. Not because she didn't want it, but because she feared what her family might say. It's a waste of money. What if I'm not good at it? Or, who am I to think I can do this now? These weren't her thoughts. They were voices she'd internalized over the years. That's the tragedy of overvaluing opinions. You begin to confuse other people's voices for your own. The Stoics would call this a form of bondage. Epictetus warned that needing approval compromises your freedom, your integrity, your very self. And this isn't just philosophy, it's psychological truth. When we tie our worth to external validation, we make ourselves emotionally dependent on forces we can't control. That dependency breeds anxiety, indecision, and deep dissatisfaction. It leaves us forever looking outward when the answers are waiting within. But Stoicism offers a different path, one rooted in self-governance. It teaches that your life should be anchored by your values, not by others' reactions. Feedback can be helpful, yes, but it must be filtered. Are the voices you're listening to helping you grow or keeping you small? Are you acting from your deepest convictions or from fear of being misunderstood? There is something quietly radical about a woman who, later in life, finally chooses to live for herself, who signs up for the art class, not because it makes sense to others, but because it stirs something true inside her. That's the wisdom Stoicism calls us to. Not loud defiance, but quiet alignment. When you no longer need applause to move forward, you begin to live with peace. And peace, not popularity, is the true mark of a wise life. Sign 4. Emotional instability and overreaction. There's a particular kind of chaos that doesn't come from the world outside, but from within. A storm of emotions that turns minor irritations into major disasters. Emotional instability is one of the most damaging and telling signs of a foolish woman, not because she feels deeply, but because she allows those feelings to drive her behavior without pause or reflection. The Stoics never said we shouldn't feel. In fact, they recognized emotions as a natural part of being human. But what they warned us against, and what still holds true today, is allowing those emotions to take the wheel. I once met a woman named Diane at a neighborhood community group. She was in her early 70s, graceful, sharp, and respected. But she had one flaw that was hard to miss. The smallest emotional disruption would send her into a spiral. One afternoon, someone forgot to include her name on a volunteer list for a local event. It was an honest oversight, quickly corrected. But Diane didn't see it that way. She snapped at the organizer, withdrew from the group entirely for weeks, and convinced herself she was being deliberately excluded. What should have been resolved with a simple conversation turned into a full-blown rupture, all because her reaction had nothing to do with the situation and everything to do with the story she told herself about it. That's the danger of emotional overreaction. It blinds us. It convinces us that we're under attack when we're not. It damages relationships and reputations, and it keeps us locked in cycles of regret and defensiveness. Stoic philosopher Seneca said, "A man is as unhappy as he has convinced himself he is." What he meant was this: it's not the event that causes suffering, but the meaning we assign to it. Diane wasn't hurt by the forgotten name. She was hurt by the story that she was unwanted. And because she believed that story, she lashed out, not just at others, but at her own peace. The Stoics taught a different way. They taught that wisdom lies not in suppressing emotion, but in mastering it. When something upsets you, don't immediately react. Instead, pause, breathe. Ask yourself, is this worth ruining my peace over? More often than not, it isn't. The ability to pause, to choose your response rather than being swept away by the emotion, is one of the greatest powers a person can develop. And it becomes even more essential as we grow older. Because with age should come not just years, but depth. Not just memory, but mastery. The wise woman doesn't avoid discomfort. She simply doesn't let it dictate her actions. She understands that calmness isn't weakness. It's authority. And when you walk through the world with emotional stability, you protect your dignity, inspire those around you, and create space for real wisdom to grow. So ask yourself honestly, am I the one reacting to life or responding to it? Because the line between foolishness and wisdom often begins with a single breath, and the decision not to let temporary emotions destroy lasting peace. Sign 5. Materialism and greed. There's a kind of emptiness that no amount of wealth can fill. And yet, in today's world, many fall into the trap of believing that happiness lies in accumulation. More clothes, more jewelry, more square footage. The foolish woman becomes defined not by her values, but by what she owns. The Stoics saw this clearly. Materialism, they taught, is one of the most deceptive forms of bondage. It looks like freedom, luxury, comfort, success, but in reality, it's a gilded cage. One you lock yourself into, one purchase at a time. This isn't just about shopping or overspending. It's about mistaking possessions for identity. A woman may appear successful to others: new car, expensive vacations, a well-decorated home. But inside she feels restless, unfulfilled, even envious. Why? Because material things are external, and anything external can be taken away. Epictetus warned us, wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. The moment you begin to chase things to feel whole, you are already admitting you are not. We see this all around us, but perhaps no story illustrates it more clearly than that of Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis. Admired for her style, elegance, and social standing, she seemed to have it all. But behind the pearls and designer gowns was a woman deeply familiar with grief, loss, and the limits of luxury. After the assassination of her husband, President John F. Kennedy, her life of wealth and status could not shield her from suffering. And in her later years, she withdrew from the spotlight, choosing a quieter, more private life focused on work, books, and introspection. In that retreat from the glamorous world, she found something deeper, what the Stoics would call ataraxia, or inner peace. Materialism is not always loud. Sometimes it hides in subtle forms, seeking approval, status, or recognition under the guise of self-care or reward. But the Stoics saw through this illusion. They believed that true power comes from within. When you tie your worth to what you own, you become a slave to every sale, every new trend, every opinion. You begin to fear loss, envy others, and measure yourself by standards that shift like sand. The wiser path, the Stoic path, calls for simplicity. It invites you to ask hard questions. Do I need this, or am I trying to soothe something deeper? Am I building a life I'm proud of, or decorating one I secretly resent? This isn't about living like a monk. It's about living with intention. A woman who is grounded in her values doesn't need approval through diamonds or handbags. Her presence speaks louder than her wardrobe. Voluntary discomfort was a Stoic practice, fasting, walking barefoot, going without luxury, to remind the soul that strength doesn't come from comfort. You don't have to go to such extremes, but you can pause before the next purchase, before the next upgrade, and ask, will this bring peace or just distraction? Because in the end, the foolish woman chases what glitters. The wise woman builds what lasts. Sign 6. Avoiding self-reflection and growth. Perhaps the most dangerous kind of foolishness is the one that stays hidden, the refusal to look inward, to ask hard questions, to examine the choices we've made and the woman we've become. Many women, especially later in life, fall into a rhythm of emotional survival. They manage homes, families, careers. They endure betrayals, disappointments, illness, and grief. But somewhere along the way, the habit of reflection disappears. They stop asking themselves if they're growing, because the answer might be too uncomfortable to hear. The Stoics believed that this avoidance is the surest path to stagnation. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire, spent his nights not in indulgence or distraction, but in reflection. He asked himself where he had failed, where he had acted out of fear or pride, and how he could do better tomorrow. Not because he was weak, but because he understood that true strength requires clarity and accountability. A woman who refuses to reflect, who blames others, distracts herself endlessly, or shrinks from honest feedback, is not protecting herself. She is delaying her growth and silently breeding her own suffering. One need only look at the life of Princess Diana to understand the transformative power of self-reflection. In her early years in the royal spotlight, Diana struggled deeply. She was thrust into an institution that didn't care for her emotional well-being, living in a marriage that left her lonely and under a public gaze that magnified every misstep. For a time, she coped through performance, appearance, and avoidance. But later in life, she began to speak openly about her struggles with mental health, her mistakes, her insecurities. She sought therapy. She asked for guidance. She admitted to having lost herself. And in that vulnerability, she found power. She became a woman who was no longer trying to be perfect for others, but someone striving to be honest with herself. Avoiding self-reflection often looks like strength, toughness, control, composure, but psychologically, it's a form of fear. Fear of what we might uncover if we really stop and listen. And for women in their 60s, 70s, and beyond, this fear becomes louder. They may think, it's too late to change, or this is just who I am now. But the Stoics would strongly disagree. They believed that the work of refining the soul has no expiration date. As long as breath is in the body, growth is possible. Without reflection, life becomes a loop. The same arguments, the same regrets, the same disappointments, recycled endlessly. But when you begin to turn inward with honesty and humility, even the smallest insight can break the cycle. You start to see your part in the chaos. You begin to take ownership, not just of your past, but of your future. And this doesn't require dramatic change. It begins in silence, in 5 minutes before bed, asking, "Did I act in line with my values today?" It begins by acknowledging when you're wrong instead of defending your ego. It begins with the courage to admit, "I'm not done learning." The foolish woman resists change and hides from herself. The wise woman meets her reflection, even when it hurts, because she knows that truth, no matter how difficult, is the first step toward transformation. That's the Stoic path, not one of perfection, but of progress. Not of pride, but of purpose. And it is always, always available, no matter your age, no matter your past. At its core, this video is not just a list of warnings, it's an invitation to transformation. These 6 signs of a foolish woman aren't meant to shame, but to illuminate. They shine a light on the quiet habits that keep us small. The urge to impress rather than express, the impulse to blame rather than reflect, the dependence on others' approval rather than our own inner compass. For many women, especially those in their later years, life has been lived for everyone else. Children, spouses, careers, expectations. Somewhere along the way, the question of who am I becoming got buried beneath responsibility, pain, or routine. Stoic philosophy brings that question back to the surface with striking clarity. The Stoics remind us that wisdom is not found in how much we know, how perfect we appear, or how much we've accumulated. It's found in how we respond to challenge, to change, to ourselves. A foolish woman is not someone who lacks intelligence, but someone who has stopped examining herself. Someone who avoids the inner work. Someone who chooses distraction over development. But the wise woman, she is different. She leans into discomfort. She looks in the mirror without flinching. She asks, what needs to change in me? Not for others, but for her own peace. And most importantly, she understands that it's never too late. Not at 60, not at 70, not ever. Wisdom doesn't arrive with age, it arrives with awareness. And the moment you choose to live with intention, to align your actions with your values, and to grow, no matter how quietly, you step out of foolishness and into freedom. This is not just a video, it's a challenge to stop performing and start becoming, to stop chasing what fades and build what lasts, to rise not for others, but for yourself. So now, ask yourself, with honesty, not harshness, which woman am I becoming? The foolish one, led by impulse, pride, or fear, or the wise one, steady, reflective, and free? The truth is, we've all been both, and that's okay. What matters is what you choose next. Wisdom doesn't come all at once. It comes in small, brave decisions day by day. The moment you start looking inward, taking responsibility, choosing peace over performance, you begin to rise. If this message stirred something in you, don't let it fade. Let it move you. Let it challenge the way you speak to yourself, the way you live, and the woman you're still becoming. And if you're ready to walk that path, not alone, but with a community of women choosing growth, grace, and stoic strength, then stay with us. Hit that subscribe button, turn on the bell, and join our journey. Leave a comment below. Which sign resonated most with you? Your story might be the spark someone else needs. This isn't just about wisdom. It's about becoming whole. And that journey starts now, with you.